So hey everyone, and in this video we are going to learn about context API. So what's exactly context API? So it actually solves the problem of prompt drilling. So in the last video we have actually faced this problem. What we did was we created some components. You can please watch the last video, you can understand this more briefly. What we did here was we created app.js. Inside this we had two components, c1 c2, and in one case we wanted to share data across c1 and c2. That is, we have defined name in app.js and we have to use it in c1 also, and we have to update it from c2. So yeah, it's one case. And we also had some subchild c1, then c11, then c12. So suppose you have value of name defined as Herschel here, and you want to use that value somewhere in C2. So what about these mediators? What about this C1 and C11? These are some mediators which actually don't need the value of name. In our case, only app.js is using name and the C12 component is using name. So C1 and C11 are unnecessary having data. This was the problem of prompt drilling. So what does context API does is it would simply solve the problem of prompt drilling. That means you don't need to share component. That means you don't need to share data across each component or each child component. You can easily get it at the last child component by just creating a variable of useContext here using useContext hook and easily calling that value here. That's it, very easily, very easily. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna follow this approach, and please watch the last video if you haven't to understand things better. Okay, so what we did was we simply had app.js. Here we simply passed name and set name to c1. C1 is again passing to c11, and c11 is passing it to c12, and c12 is finally using it. So you can see c1 and c11 are unnecessary having the data. They don't actually use it, they just forward it to the next component, child component, right? From c1 to c11, from c11 to c12, right? And also c1 and also a app.js has one child as c1, another child was c2. So c2 is also having some usage of name. So at the end you can see that name is used in a lot cases, and in sometimes there might be multiple childs which don't use the value, some childs use the value. So it's very messed up. You are actually not sure which one would be using, which is not using, and you would be messed up because if there is multiple nesting, you are not sure whose child it is, then it would be a big problem. So for solving that, we actually have useContext. Okay, so the useContext and the context API in React.js is a feature that allows you to share data across the components tree without explicitly passing props manually at each level. That means you don't need to pass props like this into each level. Okay, so this would be solved easily by using context API. So what you can actually do is at the root level, for example, my root level is app.js. Your root level can be c1 also, because c1 has some childs. So whatever is your starting point, suppose I am declaring my name value here, so I can consider my root level like this. Suppose you are declaring your name here, and you know that all the childs of c1 would be using the value name, so you would be defining name and you would be defining your context here. But I am assuming that my app.js would be having value of name, because later on I would be using it c2 also. That's one child and c1 is another child, so obviously it would be easy. Okay, so right now I'm assuming that this is my root. Okay, this is my root. That means from here all of its childs, either c1, c2 or c11 or c12, would be able to use name. Okay, so here first of all I have defined my name like this, right? I have defined my name like this. I can actually just say we have a context. So I'll just say I'll just create a file, and I'll just name it as context. Okay, I'll just name it as context. Okay, first of all, directory context. Inside this I'm going to create a file named as my context. I'm just going to name it like this, my context.js, right? So I've just named it like this, and then what I have to do, guys, is I have to simply write const my context equals, then I have to import React, and inside this we actually have create context. Okay, and here you can actually pass some default value, like you can pass some number or some default value. Initially I'm just going to leave it empty. Okay, you can pass some default value also. For example, I can just say my default value is something. Later on I'll define it explicitly, later on I'll define it, but right now I'm just leaving it empty. Okay, right now I would just export it like this, and you can see that it's easily done. I think React.js is not imported, now it's imported, right? So you can see that's how it's exactly done. So I've just created a context. Okay, now you don't know what's a context, now you'll understand what's the exact purpose of it. Just wait. So what we have done is we have just created a context. Now you have to give it some value. Where would you give it value? So you can just go to your root, and here you are just going to give it some value. So I'll just say, suppose your data is like this, right? Your data is suppose this. Instead of this, you can just define it normally also if you want to change it later on or whatever you want. Right now I'm just defining it like this, right? I've just defined it like this, and I just want to say const um, data equals, and I just want to suppose share it. Okay, so I'll just say I just want to share some data in every page. Okay, so I'll just say suppose name is exactly the value name. Okay, and suppose we have a function also, so I would just say set name would be called. Okay, so I've just created an object which would be having my name and set name. I've just created like this. You can also print this so you would get everything. I've just passing one value and one function inside an object. That's what you can do in an object, right? So I've just created an object, and now what I would want is I would just create a provider. Okay, so what I can say is here itself, suppose inside this I want to use my context. Okay, that means I would just say that whatever I pass inside this, okay, whatever I pass inside this, I think it would be better to actually pass it above. Okay, so I would just say here we have my context, right? So we just need to write my context dot provider, and it has the value of our data. That's it, my context dot provider, and just close it. We just close it. Inside this, whatever you write, all of the components would now have the data. That means would have the data. So what you have to do is you now don't need to provide data into the props like this. Automatically they would be able to use it externally. Okay, they would be easily able to use it, manipulate it. Okay, so now the case is very easy. You have just created a provider. Inside this, whatever it is, all of them would get the properties. Now you have this, right? So what you can do is suppose from this c1, from c1 what we have done is from c1 you can see c1 is using some component. Okay, so what I would do is I'm just erasing this. I'm just erasing this because I'm not sharing anything to child now. Okay, I'm not sharing it to child. Let's see what actually happens. So c1's child is c11, c1 one's child is what? C1 one's child is C12. Okay, so now at the end I'm not passing anything to C12, but now I want to actually get the data like this. Okay, whatever data I pass from the provider to the child, so it will be passed automatically. Now you can simply do one thing. You can just come here. You can just come here in C12, and suppose now you want to get the value of name. So what you can do is you can just easily type here. You can just type here. For example, you just need to type const context data equals, and now I'm just saying use context. This is a hook. Inside this I just want to call my context which I have created. That means the value would be stored inside my context. You just need to pass it like that. Okay, and now suppose from here I just want to get the value. For example, I would just say context data, and I want to get the value of name, so I can simply call this. Okay, simply call this. Let's try to use it. So if I just show you my website, what it would look like is you can see that C12 is having Harshal Jain. Okay, suppose instead of this, suppose what I've done is inside app.js I've defined, right? So I would just change my name to something like Viraj Jain. What will it happen? So now let's go here. So you can see it's getting Virajan, right? It's very easy. So now you can easily see that we don't need involvement of C1, or we don't need involvement of C11. We can directly share data from app.js to C12. That means the sharing of props from intermediary component is now removed. That means you are not very easily, you don't need to remember what component must be forwarded from here to C11 to C12. It's very confusing. Now it's very easy. You just define it here and you're using it C12. That's exactly known as use context. People are very confused about it. I explain you in very short. Okay, one more thing. Suppose if you want to use it in C2, you can also use it in C2. Suppose you would just say I want to just similarly use it here in C2. I would just say that I would just use it, and yeah, that's very easy. And what you can do is I want to extract set name from context data, and I would just say let's create a function for changing name. Okay, so I'll just say const change name, and I would just say set name as something else, like I'll just say React JS is awesome. Okay, and here I would just create a button. Okay, actually, I would extract name also from context data. That's exactly a feature of React.js. You can actually extract values from object. Okay, this was the object, and I've extracted values from object. Okay, so first of all, I got name from C2. So if I just show you it directly, what you can see is C2 is having name. Now, if I just create a button in C2 instead of this, if I just create a button in C2, what it would do is it would allow me to change name. Let's see if it allows me to change name. So if I click on change name, you can see that C12 is also now having that value. That means what I've done is I've simply changed the name. Indirectly it went to app.js, it changed the value using the context, and now wherever you have called it, that is you have called it in C12, you can easily get the new value reflected. Okay, so that's the very easy usage of context, and don't worry, I'll be sharing the source code also, you can understand from that also. So that's the very basic purpose, and you would be always using this for sharing values across your API, across your application. So the benefit is it would allow you to easily share values, and you can easily use this. For example, you have a complete user data which you have rendered from your backend. It has a lot data, very big data, and you don't need to render it again and again from your backend. So what you would do is you would just store it in a context, and you would be sharing it across different sections of your page, right? So it's very easy, it's very easy to use and very convenient. And a lot of cases when you log in into your account, if you are building a website, when you log in into your account, you would get some response from the backend along with the user data. You must store that user data somewhere. Okay, so you would be using use context so that you don't need to call that API again and again from the backend. You can directly use use context to store that data and to get data into across different components, so that it's very easy, right? So guys, I hope you understood the purpose of use context, but the better approach, instead of using use context, we have a better approach also, and I personally use that a lot, that is Redux. And Redux has its own benefit, and one more is recoil. Okay, so Redux and recoil are actually, like, you can see here the problem was, again, in use context, the problem is you have to define a central authority. Suppose this was home page, this was home page. Okay, suppose we have about page also which is using the same value, so it's very difficult to share it to that. So now what you would do is all your pages are actually at the end joining here, so you would define your variable here, and then you would be sharing it using use context. So obviously this would be a problem again in use context also. That means it's still a problem, it's still a problem, although you have avoided your sharing of props across each page, but still it's a little bit difficult to share data across different sections of your page. That means you just need to, if I have child components, parent components, then it's very easy, but if I have same level components, then it would become difficult again. So what you can do is, later on you can learn about Redux, I'll be explaining that also in the upcoming videos, or you can learn about recoil. Okay, so that's all about this video. We learned about use context, which would allow us to share data across different sections of our page. That means different components and child components very easily, and you can manipulate and you can get the data, right? So guys, I hope you understood this video. That's it for today. I will see you in the next one. Till then, have a good day. Bye bye.